So I'd like to talk a little about crowdsourcing from a very different perspective, where there is a crowd, but there isn't any connection. So I'm Kenny. I'm founder and CEO of a social enterprise startup called WeFarm. So I'm sure you're all aware that there are still a huge number of people around the world that have no access to the internet. A huge percentage of them are based in Asia, in Latin America, and particularly sub-Saharan Africa, and a huge percentage of them are involved in agriculture. So let's start with a big number, 500 million. That's the number of small-scale farmers that there are around the world who have no connection at all to the internet. Now, very obviously, that's a big problem for them, right? I mean, let's imagine for a minute that we lived here. You're 15, 20 miles walk from the nearest town, and with that, any access to the kind of vital information that you need to improve your farm, maybe to battle disease, plant a new crop, even start a new micro-enterprise. And that's really the reason that we created WeFarm, to bring the ability to both access and share vital, really important information without having to leave their farm, without having to spend any money, and most importantly, without having to have any access to the internet. Now, this is a pretty big concept or idea, right? I mean, I'm guessing I don't have to stand here in this room and eulogize about the benefits of crowdsourcing. We all know how this has changed, some would say revolutionized, the way we access information in the Western world. If we all think about pieces of information or knowledge that we might have looked up online in the last 24 hours, it's probably dozens of things: recipe for last night's dinner, directions on how to fix that problem on our phone, or to get here this morning. And we all know that probably that information or that content was generated by somebody that you've never met, and possibly even in a country that you've never even been to. And this has become normal for us. But interestingly, this goes really against how we think about information in developing countries. It's very widely acknowledged that access to information, to knowledge, is a really key part, perhaps the key part, in lifting people out of poverty. Governments, NGOs, and I'm guessing everyone here would agree with that. But if we're honest with ourselves, the way we look at this is the best way to do that is to issue top-down instructions. Essentially, that poor people just need to be told what to do. And that goes completely, obviously, in reverse. We've developed the culture of Google, Wikipedia, Quora, and all the rest in the Western world. If there's one big idea that we want to bring to life with WeFarm, is to say that the rules in the developing world aren't different. That it's about developing appropriate, relevant tools that allow people to harness generations worth of knowledge and share it with each other. This is an example of how we do that with WeFarm, a real example from our live system. So this is Victor. He's a tea farmer in Kenya, and his crop is being attacked by a type of pest or bug that he's never seen before, maybe due to climate change. So he sends a simple, totally free text message to the local WeFarm number in Kenya that outlines his problem. At that point, WeFarm can put it online so that anyone in the world that does have an internet connection can start interacting with that, and we'll send any answers back to Victor as an SMS. But more uniquely, what we do is send that out as a question to other farmers and peers in the network. So not surprisingly, in this network, there are lots of people who have relevant information to share. In this example, it was Doris. She is a tea farmer also, but in Uganda, and has been dealing with this same type of pest every day of her life for the last 10 years. So who better to start sharing genuinely relevant and useful information? So that Victor, back in his farm in rural Kenya, has just received a piece of advice that helps him save his crop without leaving the farm or spending any money. We'd also say that this isn't the end of the problem. It's not just a problem for Victor and Doris. Say it's also a problem for all of us, for me and you, and for some of the biggest businesses and governments on Earth. These same farmers supply up to 70% of all the food that we eat on Earth, and it's estimated by the UN that more than 30 billion of it a year is wasted or lost on the ground to small and easily solved problems. And it's not just the farmers who bear the consequences of this, but the big multinationals, the NGOs, and the governments who pay for this supply chain or work with these farmers, but for obvious reasons have almost zero visibility or data on what's actually happening on the ground. And that's where we can bring the other side of WeFarm. So again, we're all familiar with the concepts in the Western world, like crowdsourcing, organic information sharing, has big data behind it. Like Google or Facebook know scary amounts of information about all of us. They probably know where all of us are and where all of us are eating, and other types of scary information. But what we don't think about is the consequence of our top-down attitude to information in developing countries not developing any of these analytics outside. So I'd just like to give a couple of small examples of the type of analytics that we're starting to develop with WeFarm and kind of big social change that we can start to help with this. So this is a really simple graph. It's a really simple piece of information. For those that can't see, we have ages along the bottom here, from under 25s to over 65s. And then we have two crops. The red line is coffee, and the green line is tea. And it might be a really simple graph, but what it starts to say and analyze organically is really important for the economies of entire countries, for governments, for NGOs. What we can see is that there is a massive difference with the way that young people and old people are planting and farming coffee and tea. Whereas young people are planting a huge amount more coffee, tea is becoming increasingly an older demographic. And this is beyond the time frame of it just being a market trend in the short term. This is key information at a bigger level. What about problems and issues? I don't know how many of you are involved in the NGO or international development sector. It's somewhere where I spent almost my entire career, based in Latin America. I can tell you that even the biggest NGOs in the world have a massive information gap. All of us, every one of them, wants to think that we're doing projects or interventions based on needs and based on what people actually want. But how many people actually have this information? Almost all of it is extractive in nature. People, even at the biggest NGOs or governments in the world, in disconnected communities, they go out with a clipboard and they ask people what they want. As I'm sure any marketeer or person that's worked in marketing in the West will tell you, it's not really a great way of actually identifying what people say they need and what people actually need are usually two different things. And this is the type of information that crowdsourcing can start to give you organically. So this is real data from WeFarm and looks at people in Uganda and starts to analyze problems. On the bottom we have things such as weather, diseases, soil and pH problems, market prices, etc. And then we also have the difference between men and women. The blue line is men in Uganda and the orange line is women in Uganda. Now this again is pretty simple, basic stuff, but it starts to show you how governments and NGOs can start to react to real issues, to real information gaps. And once you start to disaggregate this by ages, by locations, you start to get a unique insight into individual communities in the developing world that is unprecedented. And just a final example, this was put together with support from the University of Reading's Climate Department. And this is looking at weather-related terms that come through the WeFarm system. So things like hot, cold, ice, storm, hail, and then mapping them by the location which they came from. Now, obviously, again, at this level, it's fairly simple to show where people suffer different weather conditions. But the long-term feature of this is being able to predict drought, being able to monitor disease, and be able to provide completely organic, reactive information to people that are unconnected to any other system. So just to tell you a little about where we are with this, it's not just an idea. We've actually launched this about a year ago. And we so far have 51,000 farmers that have signed up for this. Not quite the 20 million numbers we just heard from BlaBlaCar, but certainly in terms of unconnected communities, this is fairly substantial growth already. And I think the exciting thing for us is not just that people are signing up, but that they use it. So we've processed more than 7.5 million interactions in our first year. I'm not going to bore you with the analytics and the user metrics, but people use us more often than WhatsApp or Twitter, and I think that starts to show not how much WeFarm is great, but how much there is a gap in the market for this kind of peer-sourced crowdsourcing of information in the countries that we've never thought about it before. This is just the start of what we'd like to achieve. Our aim is to get to 1 million farmers using this in the next 12 months, and then to start to use that to do some very significant things. I'm guessing that the words big and data will be used in this event quite frequently together. I'm fairly willing to bet that what we can start to produce is the biggest data or the most relevant for poverty in the developing world. As I already mentioned, we want to start to be able to track disease, let's say an outbreak of foot-and-mouth disease. We know the locations, and we also have a direct communication route into those farmers. If our statistical model can pick up an outbreak of foot-and-mouth disease within 24 hours, we can then shut it down and alert people within a 10-mile radius that that's happening. That's fairly significant in countries where people are so isolated and unconnected to any system. And obviously that's just the start of the vision that we want to achieve with this. Our aim is to support tens of millions of farmers, and we'd like to do that by using their own knowledge and ideas. We'd love you to be a part of that with us. Anybody who wants to come and talk to me after, very willing to discuss it. And just to finish with this village that we started with, hopefully it doesn't feel quite as disconnected as it did a few minutes ago.